Wilson Memo.
Oh,
And
well,
there's
this I'm
another
happy to
question
talk
from.
about.
Great.
Yeah,
There's another question from Steve Cambion. Please, first, can you also let me know what the Wilson Memos are and people who
yes,
are unacquainted?
you need to know, and listeners need to know.
Great, great, great. And then the question is, Admiral Wilson has called the Wilson documents a total fabrication and said that he couldn't have been in the state the so-called meetings took place in at the
Yeah,
time,
I've
and
heard
so on
it.
and so on.
Right.
Okay. So there's that.
Yeah. Right. Wilson has to do that. I'm sorry, but he has to do that. And for people who still doubt this, look, there is way too much to put together. And I tell them to go to an article by Juliana Marinkovic, who actually put together all of the statements and all of the evidence about this long before this thing leaked out in 2019. Statements by Edgar Mitchell, for example. So this is the story. This is what happened. And we know this, all of this happened. I talked about Admiral Wilson back in 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, because I knew about this back then. So what happened is, this is the story. In April, this is the true story. In April 1997, Dr. Stephen Greer, who's a UFO researcher, he's making the rounds in DC. And Greer is trying to talk to anyone in DC in positions of power who are willing to listen to him about what he considered to be runaway black budget programs dealing with ET tech beyond the purview, beyond the control of the United States government. But Greer believed that there were rogue programs. And he actually had the code name of, I think, at least one of them. So he's going in, and because he's accompanied by astronaut Edgar Mitchell of Apollo 14, and also a Navy commander named Willard Miller, that got him enough cachet to get a meeting with Admiral Thomas Wilson, who at the time was Deputy Head of Intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This is April 1997. So they get a meeting, and Wilson actually is not alone there. He's with his boss, who's General Pat Hughes, who was one step above him, and there was another admiral. I can't remember that admiral's name offhand. So they have this meeting, and Greer gives his presentation. Meeting ends, and Miller, Navy commander, stays behind and talks to Wilson for a little while, and they talk about UFOs. There's an interview with Greer and Miller from, I think, 2013, where they actually talk about this meeting in a limited way, but they were like, "Oh yeah, I remember this." And Wilson's like, "Yes, hold the next meeting. Hold the next meeting. I want to talk to these guys." And he kept canceling the new meetings. It's a YouTube video, and you can hear them discussing this. But anyway, so Miller and Wilson talk about this after the fact. They're talking, and they talk about UFO cover-up. What Wilson said to Greer was that he would look into this, and he did. So for the next 2 months, he gets advice from different people in the Pentagon, including former Secretary of Defense William Perry, who just retired from that position. And he goes through a group known as OUSTAT, and within that called SAPOC, that's Special Access Program Oversight Committee, SAPOC. And he finds out that within those special access programs, these are black budget programs that have little to no oversight, that nested within one, and within that one, and then within that one, like so within one, within another, he found what he believed he was looking for. And he actually makes a phone call to the program manager of this. It's a private contractor. It's probably Lockheed Martin. And he says, "You have a program that seems to deal with a subject that I need to have oversight over, and you are negligent because I'm not overseeing this." You know, Wilson was again Deputy Head of Intelligence for the Joint Chiefs, and he thought he had oversight. He was wrong. He didn't. So the program manager says, "I'll get back to you. Let me talk to my colleagues, and we'll see what we do." So he gets back to him. He says, "Well, we're not going to have a phone conversation, but you can meet with us." And Wilson flies out. Yes, I know Wilson has said he's never went out there. Well, actually, Wilson did not say that. Wilson said he never met with Eric Davis for the interview. But anyway, Wilson goes out, and he meets with them. They tell him, yes, we're reverse engineering an alien or a craft that is not made by human hands, not by man, not of this world. And we've made painfully slow progress in understanding it. Wilson says, "Well, I want in." They're like, "No, you're not coming in." He says, "Well, you're wrong." They show him a list known as the Bigot list, BIGOT. It derives from World War II. It doesn't mean bigotry. It means something totally different. And that's a list of who's in and who's out, or who's in. And it's roughly 500 people. And he notices they're all corporate contractors. Almost none of them are DOD people. And he says, well, I need in. And they're like, no, you're not coming in. Well, what are your criteria? Well, we don't have to tell you our criteria, except you're not in. Well, I'm going to go complain. I said, be our guest, complain, see if we care. And they actually said, the only reason we're meeting with you now is because we were nearly outed a few years ago during the Pentagon audit. And we had the auditor nearly exposed us, and we had to read him in. And we're dealing with you. We've actually tightened our security measures since then. And it's true, William Perry did a total reorg of the DOD back in 1993 or 94. So anyway, so Wilson goes back and he does complain, and he's threatened with his career, and it pisses him off, but he's like, what can I do? So he was told, like, if you want to complain, you will take an early retirement. You'll probably lose a couple of stars along the way, and don't think about becoming head of DIA. So he played ball, he became head of DIA, and then 5 years later he retires. And this is what happens in 5 years. In 2002, Eric Davis is... So Mitchell was part of Greer's team. Keep that in mind. So Edgar Mitchell knew about this. He had gotten feedback that Wilson went on his wild goose chase for 2 months. Wilson probably talked to Will Miller about this. That is my best guess. He might have talked to Mitchell about it as well. Mitchell reports back to his people. Who are his people? The NIDS people under Robert Bigelow. Mitchell was on the board. So was Putoff. So was Kit Green. So was Eric Davis. All of these people. They are all of them. What is their mission? Their mission is they want to get to the center of the labyrinth. That's all they want to do. They have security clearances. They know Kit Green's another one. They know a lot, but they don't know everything that they want to know. That's the fact. So they knew about this for 5 years through Mitchell. And in 2002, when Wilson retired from the DIA, goes into private industry. It might have even been before he got hired by ATK, which is where he got hired. Eric Davis is sent out to interview Wilson. And yes, I know that Wilson denied being out there, and I don't believe him at all. Davis goes and he hits a home run interview. He sits with Wilson. He writes 13 pages of notes that are typewritten, 13 pages. Wilson Davis. They're paraphrased notes, but they're detailed because that's how Davis is. He's a brilliant physicist. He's extremely detail oriented.
I spoke to him.
He might have recorded it. He might have transcribed it just from notes. I don't know. So what does he do? He gives it to his colleagues in NIDS. He gives it to Green and Putoff and Mitchell and all those guys. In 2006, a long time ago, one of those people showed me those notes. Okay? I was shown 2 pages or possibly 3 pages, and I have never been able to figure out was it 2 or 3. I was shown part of the transcript by one of those individuals, and I will not and have not and will not give up his name because he's asked me not to. If he dies, I'll give up his name. He's still alive. The point is, so yeah, it wasn't Mitchell because Mitchell did die. However, I was shown the part of the transcript explicitly where it said, this stuff was not made by man, not by human hands, was not of this earth. And by the way, in a 2007 podcast I did with what was it called? Gene Steinberg's The Paracast. I actually was talking about this, and I didn't say that I had seen pages, by the way, because I didn't want to give that up either. But I actually didn't. I used the phrase "not made by man, not by human hands." I was referring explicitly to it. That's in a 2007 interview from July 1st, by the way. Someone can hunt that down. So anyway, I saw those pages, and but they stayed hidden for years. And I talked about it for a few years, and then I talked about it less and less. And I was like, I'd still always talked about it. In the end of 2018, the interview with Jimmy Church asked me what was the biggest story that I knew that I'd never really talked a lot about. And I brought this up. And at that point, I mentioned that I was shown pages of a document. What I didn't know at that time was that they were actually circulating among the smallest handful of people at that time, because Mitchell had died, I think in early 2017. And when he died, and I still want to be careful about how I describe this, but when he died, some of his papers were going to be thrown into a dumpster. That, believe it or not. And someone very close to Edgar Mitchell said, no, please let me take them. And the member of the family said, fine, take them. And he took them. And in those papers, among those papers, were these notes that Eric Davis had written up back in 2002. The notes that I had been shown two pages of back in 2006. Exact same thing. It leaked. Grant Cameron, researchers, saw it in November of 2018. I think I gave my interview with Jimmy Church in December of 2018, if I'm not mistaken. But I didn't know Grant had it. And then in April of 2019, someone sent them to me via a Proton mail account that they'd set up. They were on an Imgur page, IMGUR, is that how you pronounce it? So it was just a bunch of JPEGs that were not searchable. And so you had like a very, very few people who had access to this. But I saw that link and I was like, oh my dear God, this is exactly what I was shown back in 2006. So I knew it was the real deal. I knew it was the real deal. But then I thought, well, I don't want to leak it myself. Like, I didn't want to be that guy. And Grant didn't either. I talked to Grant about it. He's like, well, now you're in the box I'm in. What are you going to do? So my plan was I was going to wait. I was going to wait a limited amount of time. And if no one else leaked them, I was just hoping someone else would leak them. I didn't want to be the one to do it. But I decided if no one else was going to leak them within, maybe by the summer, was what I was thinking, maybe late summer, I had decided I would do it. And I would just take the shitstorm that would happen as a result of that. But fortunately for me, I mean, I wasn't the one who leaked it. And I actually don't know, to this day, I don't know who that person was. But I saw in early June of 2019 on a limited email list that I was part of, that people were talking about that document. And at that moment, I thought, I'm just going to do this. So I wrote and put out a YouTube video in which I called this the UFO leak of the century, which I believe it is to this day. And that's when, you've got people, look, with respect to some individuals out there, I just don't think that they've really studied this. Edgar Mitchell talked about, by the way, so after, go back to 2006, after this person showed me those pages of that document, I read Stephen Greer's recent book, which was recent at the time, called Hidden Truth, Forbidden Knowledge, in which he mentions this, and he mentioned Wilson by name. And I wrote back to my guy who had showed this to me, and I said, oh, it's Wilson. He says, yes, it's Wilson. So I thought, well, I'm going to go find Wilson myself. And this person said to me, do you think he's going to give this one up? He cannot and is not legally allowed to. And I knew this, but I thought, well, I'm just going to try, see what happens. So I found Wilson's email. I wrote to him, and it was the only time in my career that I actively misrepresented myself. I felt a little bad about it, but I thought, well, I'm just going to do it. So I didn't say I was a UFO researcher. I just said I was researching the U.S. Navy, and his career came up, and I was very intrigued, and I would like to talk with him. So fine. Sorry, Admiral Wilson. I have respect for Thomas Wilson to this day. I have nothing against this man. I understand he was put in a tough position. So anyway, he gave me his office phone number, and I called him. This is still late 2006. And so he answers the phone. I could almost hear him easing into this big chair, like getting ready for a nice long interview, And I, right away, I said, well, I write about UFOs in the U.S. military, to be honest with you. So sorry about the ambush here. But there was a meeting that I know you were part of in April 97, and it had to do with ET Tech, and you were with Stephen Greer and Edgar Mitchell. He pretended to not remember this at first. But I said, look, sir, I've got this confirmed. I said, I spoke to Edgar Mitchell. I spoke to Stephen Greer's. Greer wouldn't talk to me back then. So he had some associate who said, yes, Greer was there, of course, obviously. Mitchell, when I asked Edgar Mitchell about this, I said, well, what did Wilson say he would do? Mitchell didn't want to talk to me because I wasn't in the crowd. Mitchell said, well, Wilson just said he would look into it. That's all he said he would do. But I knew it happened. And then this other scientist who has gone unnamed, who gave me the very deep backstory that Wilson was denied access and so on. I mentioned to Wilson, I said, look, I have this on 3 sources that you absolutely had this meeting. And he said, oh, yes, I vaguely remember it now. Yeah, I was a busy man. We were worried about weapons of mass destruction and all this other stuff. I didn't have time for UFO things. He said, the only reason I even agreed to meet with him is that someone of Dr. Mitchell's stature was interested in this. And I thought, well, why would a moonwalking astronaut be interested in UFOs? Well, okay. So anyway, I said, well, the whole thing was written about in Stephen Greer's book. He said, read to me what he said. So I read the passage and in which Greer talks about the meeting, and then the follow-up in which Wilson's denied access by private contractors. And Wilson said, well, that part is true, but everything else is poppycock. And he got so angry, his voice got a bit high-pitched, and he ended the phone call. I wasn't trying to be mean to Admiral Wilson. But anyway, so that was my interaction with him. And I will just say, look, it was very obvious that this upset him. And with all of these people, like I begged the scientist who showed me those pages way back in 2006, 2019, I begged him. I said, please let me use your name. And he's like, no. And none of them do. Davis won't go on the record. Davis has come like this close. If you really would listen to Davis's statements, he is. Davis has this gift for walking right up to the line, but not stepping over it. He goes right up there. I got a no comment from Hal Puthoff and Kit Green, both of which are hilarious. No comments. They're almost like apologies rather than no comments about this. Davis issued a similar no comment. All of these people cannot talk about. If any of them were to, they would definitely lose their security clearances. And the thing is, all of them are trying to get to the center. And this is the same for Wilson. I can't believe like how people can be so naive about this world. All right, when you retire from federal classified service and you go work for private industry, you don't lose your clearances. You get more clearances and they become better and deeper. And that's because all the action's in private industry. That's where it is. So do you think Wilson doesn't have security clearances? Of course he does. They're probably better than when he was head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. All right? He can't ever cop to this. He can't. I mean, it would destroy his career and maybe more. So all of them are terrified. They're all terrified of breaking ranks. And, it's like in the mafia. And actually, one of these folks in this community said to me, it's like, you don't even need to sign NDAs at a certain point. All right. You just know. You do not give up information or things will go bad for you. They just know. They don't need to be told. So that's the world. And, it's one thing for a casual observer who doesn't really understand this world of security clearances and intelligence community and UFOs to have these questions. I understand that. But there are some experienced journalists out there. They should know better. And they seem to forget this as well. But anyway, when I talk to some of these folks behind the scenes, I will only say every one of them says, oh, yes, I know that document's totally real. I know that absolutely happened. And they've known for years. And you're in a situation here. And so I'm out here standing, at times it feels like I'm standing alone on the Wilson document, the Eric Davis Wilson notes. There are some other folks out there who support them, but they're not very forthright about it. And most people just prefer to run away. One is a famous journalist who said to me privately, oh yeah, well, I've known about this for more than a decade as well. Thanks for going out there. I'm like, well, do you want to go out there? And they're like, no, I can't. It would damage me. So unfortunately, that's where, and the irony is that this is not even a formal government document. It's private notes written up by Davis. Davis gave an interview for the Basement Office. It's the New York Post series of interviews. And he very nearly, even at that moment, practically validated those notes. People should go back and listen to it. So, no, it's a fascinating story. And I do consider it the UFO leak of the century.
Watch more podcast clips now on our YouTube channel. Go to Livewire Podcast Clips and watch more great podcast videos just like this one.